All right, Nick and Andy, it's that time of the season again when we look down towards the championship to see which teams might be getting promoted to the Premier League. A lot of familiar names there, given the three teams that went down last season are right in the scrap to come straight back up to the Premier League. But my goodness, I mean, this is one of the best championship seasons in history. I think it's fair to say any of the top four teams with the numbers they've got right now would be pretty much running away with it in most championship seasons. So to recap, obviously, at the moment, Leeds United lead the way, but Leicester do have a game in hand of them, and it's only by goal difference that Leeds has the lead at the top. And Leeds, this is the first time all season they've been top of the championship table, so they've peaked at the perfect time. Then we have Ipswich, who have been incredible, looking for back-to-back promotions, the Tractor Boys. What a season they have had there. And then Southampton have a couple of games in hand. They sit in fourth place. They win those two games in hand, and they'd be just 3 points off top spot. So, you know, as a Saints fan, there's a chance. You're telling me there's a chance. And looking at Opta right now, they have Leicester City as the favourites in their prediction of the final league position to finish first, and just under a 60% chance to finish first. They have Leeds as favourites to finish second, 45% chance of that happening for Leeds. And then Ipswich favourites to finish third with 54%, and Southampton favourites to finish fourth with 72%. But there are some intriguing scraps, and in particular, Southampton still have to go away to Leicester, Leeds, and Ipswich between now and the end of the season. And by the way, that game between Southampton and Leeds is on the final day of the season at Elland Road. So that could mean a lot and almost be a playoff final. So, Nick, I've talked a lot there about the championship. I've been watching it really closely this season. What do you make of that race for the automatic places? Because obviously it means so much to these teams to go straight back up and the finances involved, but this is just chaos, right?
It is. Joe, I was actually going to ask you about Saints, but we'll leave it for a second. It's that schedule. It's those 3 away games. They're the only reason I think that Saints might not surge into the top 2. Also, well, maybe 2 reasons. There's some congestion now because of the fire that caused the postponement of a game. But I usually like to pick the best attacking team and the best defending team. And I think Saints have produced the most chances, I believe, the last time I looked. And Leeds are just so difficult to break down. And the only difference here is Leicester's hot start and some of the caliber of players that they were able to keep around, like Kieran Dewsbury-Hall. Jamie Vardy has certainly been in a position like this before. I think it's easy enough to point to 1-2, but man, after that, it gets nuts.
Yeah, I think Leicester and Leeds, right, are the obvious choice, Andy. But the way that Leicester have collapsed in recent weeks, I mean, I think they were 18 points ahead of Ipswich this time last month. And then the way that Ipswich just keep winning after a bit of a wobble that they had, and Leicester, won 1 of the last 5. So usually it's like, oh, okay, we'll just drop down to second, but we'll still go up. But this season, there's 2 other teams snapping right at their heels to take the automatic spot. So I wonder if that's just playing on Leicester's mind a little bit, being like, we've been leading for, I think it's well over 120, 30 days of the season, and we could blow this here. So that kind of mentality really is going to be interesting down the stretch.
Yeah, maybe it's not getting quite the attention that it would be in other leagues because it's the second division, but you talk about an all-time bottle job from Leicester, the lead that they had, and you mentioned the wobble from Ipswich. Weren't they pretty – they were pretty clear in second earlier, like much earlier in the season, maybe around the midway point or so, and they have slowly slipped down, whereas Leicester have just – tumble down and come back to the pack a little bit. It's going to make obviously the final couple months of the season incredibly interesting. I'll be, deep down inside, I'll be rooting for Saints, Joe. I want to see them come back up. Had a great experience going to St. Mary's a few years ago. And I think they add something real, tangible to the Premier League. It's a big club. And that's always what I think about when it comes to promotion is there's 2 minds of thinking. Do you want one of the small clubs that nobody's ever heard of that's a great story, the Luton of this season, or do you want to bring the big boys back into the Premier League? And I typically lean towards bring the big boys back because I think it adds when the bottom of the Premier League is loaded with teams like, let's say, Leicester and Leeds and Southampton, the 3 that went down last season. I feel like the entirety of the Premier League is much healthier than when it's Sheffield United, Burnley, and whoever's going to be the third team that falls into the relegation zone this year. And so, from an overall quality standpoint, I think I lean that direction.
And you know what? It's interesting as well when you think about it and you speak to neutrals. Like, who would you like to come up? Both Leicester and Southampton are essentially playing this season like Manchester City play in the Championship, which is very, very difficult to do. Burnley had great success doing it with Vincent Kompany last season. But that's interesting to me as well, where usually, generally speaking, teams go up for the championships, they're hard, they fight, they defend, they play long balls. It's not really like that anymore. And I think this season, watch the championship so closely as a Saints fan, there is really not much difference between the bottom 7 or 8 teams in the Premier League and the top 7 or 8 in the championships in terms of quality. And I think Leicester, Southampton, Ipswich, and Leeds all have a very clear identity about who they are, what they want to do. And you could see that if they came up, they would actually be pretty good in the Premier League next season. I think Leicester, Leeds, and Saints needed that a little bit of reset after success and promotions and getting into the top flight and all the rest of it. I think it was actually beneficial for those 3 bigger teams to reset and go again. So I'm excited as you can. I'm going to try and go to as many games as I can midweek between here and the end of the season and see what happens. But Nick, any kind of prediction in terms of the playoffs? Because we look at some of the other teams down there. Coventry are surging in the FA Cup semi-final as well. West Brom are solid. Norwich, solid under David Wagner, who's done it before. Hull City, really good team. And you got Preston and Middlesbrough there as well, floating around. So that's going to be fun as well, because as we saw with Luton last season, if you get into the playoffs, who knows what's possible?
Yeah, absolutely right. And there are some teams that are a nightmare to play against. We mentioned in our meeting yesterday, talking about Coventry City and how they've got these 2 guys firing up top and a bunch of other guys ready to punch you in the face. And you never know what's going to happen in the playoffs because of that. It's why getting one of those first 2 spots is so important. Look, I've got my USMNT glasses on here. I can't help but look at Coventry with Haji Wright. Obviously, he scored in a World Cup as well. And Josh Sargent, who is just never stops moving his legs, the ginger Brendan Aronson. So I just think it's hard for me not to just root for those 2 Americans to figure it out.
Andy, playoff thoughts? What do you reckon?
Chaos, absolute chaos. It's this time of year. I always think back to that incredible moment between Leicester and Watford at the very, very end, and the dodgy penalty call, and the save, and the outlet
Troy
to
Deeney?
the other. Troy Deeney just, giving it, really, really giving it after scoring that one. An all-time moment down in the championship, and I think just encapsulates everything that the second division and fighting for promotion to the Premier League and what those playoffs can be like. And so I hope for a moment like that, and I hope at the end of it, it's Southampton celebrating on the field at Wembley, going back to the Premier League.
I really hope that was the case and will be the case for sure. But is there any questions you want to ask me about Southampton, Nick, Andy? I know that we talk a lot about it, but obviously there's a team close to my heart, and last season was very tough. So I have to say I've really enjoyed watching them this season, and I think probably fans of Leicester, Leeds, and Saints will be a little bit hesitant about going up again, just maybe thinking, it's kind of fun to win, like 25, 30 games a season. And, you've seen it with Brentford, Andy, a club that you've rooted for in the past, and Nick with Newcastle have gone down. It can be a bit difficult to try and drag yourself away from winning most weeks and thinking about what could happen in the Premier League the next season.
Well, it's funny because I've lived it twice with Newcastle, and the first year that they came right back up with Chris Hughton, they just ran through everybody like a buzzsaw, and that was so much fun. But the second time they came back with Rafa, they kind of sputtered down the stretch, and I would rather have the stress of can they stay up than the stress of will they blow it. That's just my vibe. And my only question for you, Joe and Andy, is Saints have been better than almost everybody else. Does that make you feel better or worse in a playoff situation over 2 legs?
Probably a bit worse, I think. I think generally that is my mindset. Yeah, but I think that like I said, Saints and Leicester have an incredible playing style, take a lot of risks. Talking inverted fullbacks, centre backs being, 20, 30 yards from the opponent's goal with the ball. And they are very susceptible on the counter attack. So when I look at the other teams in the playoffs, the likes of West Brom, Coventry, if they make it, Norwich, over a 2 legs or a one-off game at Wembley in the final, if that was to be the case, I'd be a little bit concerned. I would be a little bit concerned that at one moment they could just make a mistake and be punished for it, because they're very fun to watch, score a lot of goals. Adam Armstrong is the championship Maradona. We all know that. Bangs in loads of goals. So they're fun to watch, but you have to watch them through both hands sometimes and hope for the best. But Andy, I don't know if you want to add anything on that.
Now, how much, if let's say they go up, how much does the squad change? Because I'm looking at a lot of names that have been in the Premier League, with Southampton, and maybe didn't have the best time in the Premier League. So is it the veteran squad that can just get you out of the championship, or is it the young squad that's growing kind of as a unit and ready to launch forward in a Premier League challenge?
It's really interesting. I think they could go 2 ways with it. I think Sport Republic, with the new ownership group that came in, obviously tried to change and changed probably too much too soon, and that's why the squad was imbalanced and they got relegated in the first place. But their recruitment has been really good this season, and I'd back them to probably pluck a few gems. And obviously you have the limitations about how much you can spend. So I think Saints will probably rely on a mixture of experience, and then they have some really good players coming through the academy. Dibbling, Jordan McGoma at the left back position. Jaden McGoma. And they have some really good, talented teenagers again. So,
and guys coming back from loan, right? They could have some really good players coming back from loan.
Yeah, Bella Kotchap. There's a lot of players out on loan. So I think, like I said before, it's a really good chance of a reset for Leicester, Leeds, and Saints. And however many of those teams come up, they have a lot of players that they can probably bring back, and they would have learned their lessons, really harsh lessons from the last time. I think the Premier League will be a lot stronger for it, like you mentioned, Andy, if all 3 of those teams come up. But Ipswich, incredible season. I have to give your hats off to them. So whichever team out of those 4 teams we mentioned at the very top of the league that doesn't, make it, then I think next season they're going to be red-hot favourites to come up. So we'll keep you updated on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com with all the latest on the promotion push as those teams push to get back in the Premier League or get back there for the first time in a long time. It's going to be fun. I know that. It's going to be chaos. So try and help me out, lads, down the stretch, because it's going to be an interesting one.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch more videos all season long. And for even more Premier League content, from original series to live matches, head over to Peacock. And be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend on USA Network and on Peacock. We will see you there.